Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday and welcome to House Talk Pregame. I am your sports mental health and corporate empowerment coach, Dr. Lauren Pitts. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My goodness, what a week, what a week, what a week it has been. Before I get into all of that, as you well know, we share week in and week out that for the time being, Andre, my son, and Jared Johnston are not able to be with us. They are handling other responsibilities at this time, but they will be back with us relatively soon.
Jared did get his first win of the season.
Yes,
They
they
won. They
go their
won.
money.
They won 35-6. I think they played this past Monday. So shout out to Jared and oh God, what is it? Garfield, I think. Garfield High
Yes,
School. Yeah.
yes,
Garfield. Shout out to
yes.
Garfield High School and them on their first win.
Congratulations, Jay and the team. Absolutely. Ronnie is always with us, though he won't be with us next weekend, and he'll be back the week after that. But I'm so honored and proud to have Carla Debro with us, holding it down, holding it down, holding it down for the next few weeks with us. As you know, Carla is a former HBCU scholar athlete and women's basketball coach, both for HBCUs and PWIs. And now she is embracing all of the wonderfulness of her referee career. So, super excited to have her with us. It's such a big deal here for us at pregame because we really are all about family. It's all about your family. It's all about our family. It's all about our collective family as a cultural group of Black and Brown persons all over this country, and truth be told, all around the world. So, week after week, we sort of foundationally shine the light on HBCUs and our HBCU family. We provide tons and tons and tons of valuable information to help you and your family and the HBCU and broader Black and Brown community across the nation and around the world, student and professional athletes and their families, and our Heritage Sports Radio Network family. And we share this information that is sports in context, that is mental health in context. And we do that because we know that you're making all of these life decisions, right? And we believe that this information that we're sharing week in and week out is necessary in order for you to make well informed decisions. So we want to make sure that we are helping you make those decisions that we know are going to be instrumental in helping you to transform your life. Please don't forget that you can always catch us on Heritage Sports Radio Network every Saturday at this same time, 11 a.m. East Coast time, and also at 10 p.m. East Coast time on Saturdays. You can catch us on Sundays on HSRN at 6 p.m. We have, oh my goodness, we have a earth shaking discussion for y'all today that is just going to be information. We're gonna go ahead and tell you, you might be a little ticked off before it's all said and done, but it's all good. It's all good to be a little angry sometimes. It's what you do with that anger that matters. But it's gonna be a powerful discussion that we want you to be a part of. So we want you to comment in the chat window. Next week we're gonna start opening it up via the Zoom link so that you can engage and be a part of all this powerful information that's coming forth. Ronnie, give them some more info.
All right, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again on another Saturday morning. So, like Dr. Pitt said, we have a great conversation today. Today, we're going to be talking about conformity and non-conformity in sports. So, what makes somebody a conformist and what makes somebody a non-conformist? All right, are there benefits to being a conformist? And are there benefits to being a non-conformist? So when we talk about conformity in sports and non-conformity, is it beneficial for the sport or those student athletes, or is it non-beneficial? Especially when we talk about, like last week, we talked about the elite Black athletes, choosing between HBCUs and PWIs, the conformists versus the non-conformists in that conversation. Who does that benefit? Does it benefit the school, or does it benefit the student athlete and the people around them? So we're going to be covering all these topics today in these conversations. So along with Dr. Pitts also has a couple businesses to shout out today. And we also have some more mental health tips for you coming at you right now, actually. So each week, we've been doing mental health tips since the beginning of February. Before that, we were doing the diagnosis of the week, where we would talk about a diagnosis, give you the signs, symptoms, behaviors, mannerisms, the whole 9 yards, along with treatment tips and resources. So we switched it up a little bit, and we're talking about mental health tips, just simple tips that you can incorporate slowly into your life on a gradual, consistent basis to improve the overall quality of your life. So, Dr. Pitts, do you want to go first, or you want me to take it away?
You can go. I'm actually sharing this to our partner pages to make sure that everybody's getting us streaming live. You can go right ahead.
Got you. All righty. So, all right. So, my mental health tip for this week kind of ties into our conversation, and I'll talk about that later into the show, how it ties in. Is I have 5 reminders for an overthinker. So before we get into that, what is an overthinker? An overthinker is somebody who literally just takes a situation or a problem or issue and literally overanalyzes it, thinks about every possible solution, outcome. Well, if I said this, well, if I did that, well, what if I'd have looked this way or looked that way? All these possible scenarios that in all reality might not even be relevant to the actual situation or issue at hand. So my first reminder for somebody who might be an overthinker is, remember, the more energy you give to irrational thoughts, the bigger and more serious they feel. So when we talk about irrational thoughts, what are some irrational thoughts I could be talking about? For example, I must be competent in everything I do or I will never succeed. My emotions are outside of my control. I can never make a mistake or I'll be seen as a failure. I must please others to feel good about myself. And if someone criticizes me, there must be something wrong with me. All of these can be what we consider irrational thoughts. And if you allow them to get bigger and bigger and fester in your head, they will feel more serious, and you can have physical effects such as, nausea, headaches, chest, heart issues, things like that. The mental stress and the mental anxiety that you allow to keep the fester and build up can also have serious physical complications. Number 2, perspective is everything. Ask yourself, is this situation or this issue going to matter in a week, a month, or even a year? Oftentimes, as people, we take a situation that could be very small, like maybe, let's say, for example, me and my wife had a disagreement about me leaving the toilet seat up. And, she's pregnant right now. So, she could be, very, moody and whatnot. So she might just take it and run with it. So, me being the husband, it's first thing in the morning, I'm like, I'm not trying to hear all that. But is that situation going to matter next week? Absolutely not. Is it going to matter next month? Absolutely not. Is it going to matter next year? No. So I say all that to say, if it's a small issue, if it's not a life or death situation, let it go. All right. Whatever happens, happens. Just let it go. It's not that big of a deal. All right. Number 3, many of the things we overthink don't happen anyway. It's hard in the moment, but don't let things that are unlikely to materialize consume you. I'll give you a perfect example of this. My first time ever being on a plane was for me and my wife's honeymoon. I had never been on a plane, never been to an airport, nothing. So we're leaving from Richmond International Airport, heading to Miami to go to Jamaica. So the entire flight from Richmond to Miami, I was clenched in my seat thinking of every scenario. Every time the plane bumped, shook, dropped, went up, sped up, slowed down, turned sideways. My mind was just in life or death mode the entire time. Did I get there? Absolutely. I'm here talking to you all nowadays. So I say all that to say, sometimes don't make a situation worse than what it has to be, especially when, in all reality, being in a plane is safer than being in a car, But oftentimes I tell people in situations like that, the ability to not control the situation is often why it leads to overthinking, not being able to be in control of that situation, which that can be for a separate conversation. Number 4, if you're overthinking something you think you've done or said wrong, remember you're allowed to ask someone if you've upset them. It might feel hard, but it'll save you hours of overthinking, and talking to someone about it will help you rationalize. So let's say, for example, you're at work and you say something to a colleague that, you feel like might have offended them. As opposed to allowing that thought, well, did I say that? Could I have said that differently? Could I have used a different tone? Could I have, pulled them to the side and not said that in front of everybody else? Instead of just thinking of all those thoughts, walk up to that person, pull them to the side and say, hey, during our meeting earlier, did what I say offend you, or did you feel some type of way? If so, I apologize for that. Maybe let me clear up how I was trying to portray what I wanted to say. Work it out. Be an adult, have adult conversations. Don't allow those thoughts of, well, let me not go over there and say anything because they probably don't want to talk to me anyways, or they ain't gonna mess with me no more. No, go talk to that person. And if you feel bad for what you said, or you want to clarify what you said, apologize and clarify what you're trying to say. Don't allow that thought to just keep festering in your mind. And last but not least, remember you're not alone. There are many people who struggle with overthinking on a daily basis. And that is very true. Even somebody like myself, who is a clinician and has, numerous years of experience in mental health and understanding mental health, I still suffer from overthinking. I'm human at the end of the day. Sometimes that happens. When I don't know something, my mind, it will think of every solution or possible scenario that can happen in that situation until it's known, until it happens. That happens. That's natural. I like to tell people, when you feel those thoughts coming on, try to center yourself, try to remember, bring yourself back in and ask, important questions and find out as much information about whatever it is that is unknown to you as possible. So those are my tips for this week. Dr. Pitts, back to you.
Thank you. And that's interesting, Ronnie, because I'm actually going to piggyback on both of my tips for this week, because my focus has been on nurturing your relationships. My first tip is, to Ronnie's point about the bumps in the road in the relationship, right? One of the things that I tell my clients all the time is, I say, I'm going to provoke your thoughts. I want you to think about this. Is what you're arguing about, if one of you died tomorrow, or if one of you experienced some sort of critical incident that literally was life altering, is what you're arguing about right now worth it? Is it worth it? And is it going to matter if you wake up tomorrow and get that dreaded phone call that your spouse is gone from this earth? And of course, everybody says no. Then what the heck you arguing about it for? Why are you arguing about it? But I get it, right? I'm human, but the bottom line is, I'm so thankful, because I'm at a place and space in my life where, trust and believe, it's not that Eric doesn't piss me off, because he does, but I am able to pull from a frame of reference from my professional training that helps me to be personally and professionally present when I'm dealing with challenges that come up in my own relationship. We're human, right? We have feelings. Stuff gets on our nerves. Stuff rubs us the wrong way. I hate falling into the toilet in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
Yeah, like that's not a good look for me. So, and of course, his argument, to your point, Ronnie, is, well, why do women do everything in the dark? And I said, because we don't have to aim and shoot. We know where everything is. I don't have to see. I know where it is. I can turn around and sit down. And oh, by the way, if I turn the light on like you all do, I'm not going to go right back to sleep. And when Dr. Pitts is deprived of sleep, I'm a hateful, fire-breathing dragon. So it's better for everybody for y'all to just put down the seat. Just put down the clock.
And plus, it takes too much time to turn on the light, and you might, we're in a rush.
So this is a universal feeling, is what I'm hearing. This is a universal feeling.
Yes. Oh yes.
Wow.
It is.
I feel like I'm looking at two versions of my wife. Wow.
I don't need the light. I know where. Look, and it don't move. It don't move. It don't shift. I don't have to rearrange it. It's at the same place every single solitary time I get ready to go to the bathroom. So
this is crazy.
So anyway, so my point to this is, if you're experiencing some road bumps in your relationship, and you really are questioning whether or not you're going to stay in the relationship, because a lot of people default to divorce, and I'm breaking up with you and I'm leaving and all this stuff, and that's, the reality of it is, sometimes that is the answer, because you married the wrong person in the first darn place. But
that's true.
Real talk, right? Sometimes you're like, what was you thinking? You're not supposed to be with him. You're not supposed to be with her. Cut that out. But then for those that really are in a place and space where their relationship can be salvaged, you truly may want to consider seeking couples therapy. As you know, Ronnie and I are mental health practitioners, and we believe very strongly that not only, psychotherapy, period, but the emphasis right now for this segment is couples therapy really can help couples to strengthen their relationships. But success of the therapeutic process is going to depend on when you come in. And what I tell people, and this is going to sound real crazy, look, this is non-conforming like a mug. I tell people, if I can break you up, then you probably shouldn't have got married in the first place. And that's real talk. And folks
Mm,
look at me, you know, they
mm,
sit back in their season like, well, Dr. Pitts, what are you saying? I mean that. I don't know
mm,
you from a can of paint. But if I can jerk you, because I poked the bear, y'all know Dr. Pitts carry a
mm.
bat and a 2x4. If I can break you up, then you probably should not have gotten married in the first place. So, you know, as harsh as that sounds, it really gives folks something to think about. Now, of course, I don't go into the therapeutic process. So let me see if I can break them up. I don't take that approach. But what I tell them is that if I am able to cause more discord and more dissension and strife,
Mm.
then your foundation is weak. And that gives us a place to start the therapeutic process because we know that if a house has a weak foundation, the house is going to crumble.
Yeah.
So the therapeutic approach then becomes, okay, how can I work with this couple to strengthen their foundation so that we can work on those other layers of things that may be arising for them that are causing them to contemplate whether or not they should be together in the first place. And I'm going to tie that into my shout out to a Black owned business. My colleague, Marissa Nelson, she is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sex therapist. She is the founder of Intimacy IVF and Intimacy Moons in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So, if any of you are in the D.C. metropolitan area and you are really questioning not just whether or not you need couples therapy, you could be needing some individual work as well. Or if you're finding yourself that you want to be in a relationship and that's constantly breaking or whatever, please check out Marissa. She's an extraordinary, extraordinary therapist. We graduated together. She is an amazing, amazing clinician. And I know that she will absolutely positively serve you well should you decide to reach out to her for services. But her specialty is couples work, particularly within the context of sex issues and infertility issues. So please give her a look. The other tip that I want to give you is be curious about your emotions, also to Ronnie's point, especially the hard ones such as fear, anger, shame, and sadness. Ask questions and be patient when trying to understand and learn from your emotions. And what that speaks to is, and I think Carla, you touched on it last week, folk don't know who they are. So you're in this relationship, you don't know who you are. So how can your partner or spouse know who you are? You're each married to strangers. So you have to be willing to do the self work to get in touch with your own emotions, to get intimately acquainted with yourself. And you have to be willing to be honest and transparent with yourself about yourself and what's going on. I think about a situation that I was working with a couple, and what came up in this particular situation was um, an incident that happened 30 years ago. It was an incident that happened 30 years ago that one of the individuals in the relationship had never gotten resolved from. And, both persons are weeping. And I said, how can you be in a healthy, loving, and fulfilling relationship with each other when you're individually not whole? When you have yet to allow yourself the space to heal and that pain, not only have you carried all of that pain into your present relationship, but it's baggage that's hindering you from showing up as the absolute best version of yourself because you're continuing to function every minute of every day from that place of pain. So, folks, you have got to get in touch. And don't think for a second that this doesn't tie into sports, because it absolutely positively does. There are athletes all over the place at the high school level, the collegiate level, and the professional level that have unresolved mommy issues and daddy issues and self esteem issues and all types of stuff what we call those signature themes: fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. Am I good enough? I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And we'll get into this more as we get ready to dive into this robust discussion. But you see yourself show up. And here's the other thing, and this goes to what we were discussing before we went live. You will always see representatives of yourself showing up in your life. If you don't, and I'm gonna let Carla speak to that more during the show, but clinically, we know that to be true. Clinically, we're told as mental health practitioners that the more you do this work, the more you see yourself walk through the door. So as I shared last week, I have something in common with every single solitary client on my caseload. And right now I got a caseload of 21, about to be 100 at the rate I'm going. These clients are coming at me so fast. But I literally have something in common with every single solitary client that I've ever worked with in all these years that I've been a mental health practitioner. So it will help us to stay true to self and to be cognizant of how we're showing up in our relationships and why we're showing up the way we are in these relationships. And oh, by the way, what can we do to do a better job of showing up as the healthiest version of ourselves as possible? Then the last thing that I want to share with you, and I'm actually going to share these links, I'm going to put them in the chat window in just a moment. The second business that I want to shout out is an organization in Kansas City, Missouri. It was founded by Chanel Smith. It is called HBCU Walking Billboard, and she's getting ready to launch the HBCU Prospects program. And what she has done, she's a Fisk University graduate, and what she has done is an extraordinary job of taking the bull by the horns and really bringing spotlight. She made a very valid point during her interview that because of where she's located at in Kansas City, Missouri, the majority of the schools that are highlighted for students from Kansas City to consider attending are PWIs. So she has made it her mission to educate and empower students starting at the middle school level about HBCUs and the benefits associated with attending an HBCU. The other program that I want to bring to light is Why Not Us, which is a docu-series on North Carolina Central University's men's basketball team. And Chris Paul is taking great pride and appreciation and showing his love for HBCUs and fully displaying that love. So I'm going to put those links into the chat window so you, our viewing and listening audience, can reference those resources, because we have to come together. We have to start doing some things differently. We have to be willing in healthy, positive, and productive ways to at least entertain what it means to be a nonconformist. So Ronnie, you go ahead, you and Carla go ahead and move forward. I'm going to share these links and we're going to get this conversation started.
All right. Real quick, I wanted to share something I heard this week. To your point about people not knowing themselves in relationships, I had a coworker during the meeting say that whatever one of your 5 love languages is something that you didn't get as a child. And when they said that, I did some thinking. I was like, man, I guess in some instances that can be true for people. It was very, I don't even share the whole conversation, but.
What just happened? Wait a minute, Ronnie, hold on.
And when they said that, I did some thinking. I was like, man, I guess in some instances that can be true for people. I just had to run it back for people. That's all,
Double take.
When they say it again, Pastor, say it again.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. There was like this. You didn't hear that? There was like this insane.
I heard it.
I don't know what that was. Go ahead.
But no, I just thought that was an interesting point that they made. A lot of people, whatever they identify as their love languages, is often something that they were neglected to get as a child, and that's what they seek in their partner. And I think that's where you see a lot of these issues in relationships. But I just wanted to throw that out there to you, a point earlier. So, all right, let's get into this conversation, guys. So, like I said, this week's conversation is conformity and non-conformity in sports. So, When I think of conformity, and I looked up the definition just to make sure I had it right. So the Webster's definition for conformity is compliance with standards, rules, or laws. So when I think of conformity within sports, I think of, let's take football, for example. I think of, of course, the rules like holding, false starts, things like that. I think of the standards, or in this case, the culture and traditions of football being, an alpha male sport, being, the biggest, strongest, and fastest human beings possible to be able to play this sport, things that we all conform to. I think of the laws or the governing bodies when we think of the NFL and how they govern, with the bargaining agreement between athletes and owners and things like that. So all these things in sports that we kind of just go along with in terms of conformity. But we want to highlight a little bit more today, non-conformity in sports. So when we talk about non-conformity, like I was telling Dr. Pitts and Ms. Carla before the show started, one of the first people I think of when I think of non-conformity is Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And Dr. Pitts and Carla can definitely share more examples. But for me growing up, one of the first people I heard that, stood for something outside of just sports was, Muhammad Ali, and how he didn't conform with the, military draft and going overseas to fight in the Vietnam War. He didn't conform to the name that his birth name, Cassius Clay, that was given to him by his parents. He changed his name. He changed his religion because he didn't want to conform to the religion that was preached to him in the churches on Sunday in Louisville, Kentucky. So everything about Muhammad Ali was kind of this rebel spirit, go against the grain. I'm going to stand on my morals and my principles. If you like it, cool. If you don't like it, well, I don't need you in my circle. So, and there's many other examples. And even in today's time, when we think of nonconformity, just yesterday and earlier this week, the soccer player, I know his first name is Zlatan something. I don't want to mess up his last name. But when he did an interview talking about LeBron James to just stick to playing sports, stick to being an athlete. And we've heard this narrative many times over again, specifically even with LeBron James. Back in, I think, 2016 and 2017, the lady from Fox News who told him to just shut up and dribble. Think of all the things that LeBron James has done, being a nonconformist of just being an athlete. His whole brand, more than an athlete, his I Promise School, his helping this past election year with getting, I think, over 42,000 people signed up and getting their voting rights back. If he would have just conformed to just sticking to be an athlete, this would have never happened. Even Chris Paul, for example, going against the grain of not being an athlete, producing this docuseries for North Carolina Central, exposing and putting that awareness out there for people to understand what it's like to be at a HBCU. So we see these nonconformists throughout all sports and throughout the history of sports. So, Carla, Woody, how do you feel about this whole argument of conformity and nonconformity in sports?
Well, you took it a lot deeper than I was thinking. I mean, the first person I thought of was Dennis Rodman, in terms of his personality and the conformity of and how he fit within the framework of the team. Mm-hmm. And the fact that his outlandish behavior basically fit within the Bulls. He was allowed to be himself. I mean, I didn't go as far. I stick within the framework of team and sport, and to be allowed and for individuals to be allowed to be themselves, and how that works within the framework of a team, especially if that person performed and didn't take away from the team. So that was the first. Yeah, you went way beyond my thoughts. Sports. I took a class in sports management, and one thing that they said, that sports is the opiate of the classes of the society. And people watch sports basically to get away from reality. So, and also think about the stories that who's that UCLA, Bill Walton, right? And he wanted to, during the 60s, he was protesting, and the coach I don't know why I can't think of his name. I love him to death.
John Wooden.
John Wooden, yes, yeah. So John Wooden, Bill, asked for a day off from practice to protest, and Coach Wooden said, "Hey, you can do whatever you want to do on your time." So sports is a great thing, and athletes have personality which should be respected, and they have outside interests that should be respected. But my question to you is, at what point does the sport itself hurt because of political leanings, especially in an arena where people come to kind of deaden their brain?
Man, I think that's a great question. And to your point, I don't know how I could necessarily answer that to, I guess, give you a good answer, because when I think about that, to your point, when we think about people come to watch sports to get away from reality, they don't want to come see athletes talk about politics or, injustices and things like that. They just want to see them, come throw a football, shoot a basketball, compete against each other, knock their heads off, things like that. And I think,
I mean, let me interrupt you there. Let me clarify, not to say that they can't talk about that, but there are venues for everything.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, when we think about athletes and, voicing their opinions about, injustices, within the country, playing equality and things like that. When we talk about athletes, a lot of that time, a lot of this, the media, there's so much more media opportunities for these athletes now. You have social media, so they have other platforms to get these points across. And I think to your point, as long as the message doesn't interrupt the athlete's performance in their respective sport, I think have at it. And I think to the fans, my thing to you is, well, if you don't want to hear that athlete talk about it, we'll just turn the TV off. You're just watching them play. It's not like during the game, like on, during NBA games when they interview the coach in between quarters and stuff. It's not like they're asking the coach, like Doc Rivers, for example. It's not like during the bubble, they were asking Doc Rivers during the game, well, Doc, how did you feel about what happened to the guy in Milwaukee when they were in the bubble? He was shot by the cops twice in the back. He wasn't asking him during the game. Now, after the game, after he answered the basketball questions, then I want to talk about this. I want to share my point on this. But during the game, I would argue that I'm pretty sure coach was locked in on the game and what was happening. Right. I think it's kind of unfair of fans to just sit there and think that players can't turn it on and turn it off. That's kind of our whole genetic makeup when it comes to sports, is being able to turn it on and turn it off. Right. When I go on that football field, all I'm thinking about is football. I don't care about what's happening off the field. I don't care what's happening with my family or friends or what's going on in the outside world. I care about what's on this football field right here in front of me. When I get off the field, I'll tend to that then. And I think that's how fans should look at it. These athletes, you're paying, they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars. And especially if you go to watch them in person, you're paying thousands of dollars to go watch these people perform at a high level. Okay, then. They performed at a high level. They did their part. Now, if they want to talk about other stuff outside of the sport, that they're human. That's their right. Just like when you, like, for example, me being a counselor, if that was all expected of me would just talk about counseling 24/7, I would lose my mind. Like,
that's real.
I have to be able to talk about other things. I talk about politics. I talk about sports. I talk about life. I have to be able to delve into other things, because if all I focused was on counseling and my clients right now, I would be a client.
Yeah.
So
I think, let me jump in for a second, Ronnie. I think what you just said, not to cut you off, I think you're talking about balance and the importance of having that balance. And
absolutely.
It makes me think about, as you were both speaking, I think about that platform that particularly elite athletes have, whether they're elite scholar athletes at the collegiate level or elite athletes that have made it into their respective leagues. You have, like, I honestly feel like, in all fairness, you can't say, oh, well, these athletes are role models and you have kids and people looking up to them, the whole 9 yards, and then flip it and say, well, I don't want to hear what they have to say about X, Y, or Z. That's an oxymoron to me. Like they have this stage that the vast majority of the world does not have. And yes, they are playing their sport, but when you look at the role and the impact that they can have within the context of civic consciousness, social justice, and equality, they have the microphone. They have the ability to be heard on a far broader scale than just regular everyday folks do. So, you know, when I think about even now with all the craziness that's going on here in Texas and, you know, native Texans, you know, Beyonce and Matthew McConaughey and folks that have this platform that they can make a difference. And I think that it's important that they do that effectively. And to that point, I want to reference the ones that came to mind. I jotted down when you and Carla were talking. So Jill Ellis, I don't know if you all know who Jill Ellis is, but Jill Ellis used to be the coach of the U.S. women's soccer team. So, you know, they won the several World Cups, they won the gold medal. She was also the coach at USC, but she's also gay. And in the documentary, the playbook on Netflix, the coaches rules on life or something like that, but it's a great docuseries. But she's one of the coaches that is highlighted on there along with Doc Rivers, and I'm gonna touch on him in a second. But she talks about how hard it was for her to come out in this society that, yes, we know that LGBTQ plus community has more rights and privileges possibly than they've ever had in the history of the world, and they're a protected class now. But we also know that there's still a stigma that exists in our society. And she was really, 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 really nervous and went through a period of serious discomfort about that. But because she and her wife had adopted a baby, she wanted her daughter to be able to grow up free. She didn't want to create this space for her daughter to grow up and be ostracized because she has two mothers. So, you know, she thought about it, she meditated on it, and she was like, you know what, I have to do this. And she came out to her team first, and she got full as she was talking about how loving and warm and embracing they were of her, which gave her the courage that she needed to go and tell the athletic director at USC, who was also equally supportive and really just loved on her and encouraged her, to Carla's point, to be authentically who she is and to be the best version of herself that she can be. Well, how could she have possibly done that if she had continued to live a life closeted? She wouldn't have. It would have created this barrier for her to do all that she was purposed and predestined to do here on earth. The second person that I want to highlight is Dak Prescott. And when he had the press conference and came out and went against the grain at that time, acknowledging that he was having struggles with his mental health. You know, there are people, as you all know, there are people who criticized him doing that. Criticized him doing that because he was Black, and criticized him for doing that because they felt like that was going to damage his career. The other person that I didn't write down, I don't remember his name, I'm just going to reference him and keep moving, is the other NFL player who came out right at the guy, he was supposed to play for Denver Broncos, I think.
You talking about the boy from Missouri that played defensive end?
I don't remember, but he came out right after the draft. And
this boy came out right before the draft.
Yeah, I know you. I know. Yes, I know what you're talking.
And so he was the epitome of a nonconformist. But in that example, you have to question if the timing, not that it was wrong for him to come out, because I don't believe that it was wrong for him to come out. I believe that the timing could have been different.
Right.
But he epitomized, you know, what it looks like to be a nonconformist. You were going to say something, Ronnie?
Yeah, and I think to your point, when we talk about, you know, the LGBTQ IA plus community, and especially in football, when we talk about, hyper masculinity at its highest, like I said, football is an alpha male sport. I'll share a story with you. So my junior year, we had a running back transfer in from James Madison University, a Division I AA school. And he transferred to our school for his 5th year. And so when he got there, at first, there was rumblings around the team, like, hey, is such and such gay? Like, do you think he might be? And, nobody really knew for, sure. But by the season started, even though he didn't tell us, we knew at that point. Like, it was kind of like, some of his actions and stuff like that, not towards people in the locker room, but just his actions and how he carried himself. We were like, yeah, he definitely might be, and, to our point, well, hell, we didn't care. Like, he came from JMU. And I mean, in practice, you can say what you want, whatever his sexuality was, that's him. But on that field, oh, he was a grown man. Like, this dude was 6'2", 225, and could run a 4.4 like it was nothing. Just gifted. So, we could care less about his sexuality. So literally the last game of the season, we were playing Virginia Union. And going into the game, he was 2 touchdowns short of breaking the season record for rushing touchdowns in a season at Virginia State. So on literally the touchdown that he broke it, I kid you not, he ran, I think, about a good, like 70 yards. It was like 70 or 73 yards. And I kid you not, when he crossed the end zone, the line into the end zone, he started twerking in the end zone when he broke the record. And we lost it. Like,
well, I see men twerking all the time, so I don't know if that's an indicator.
Yeah, but this was like, he was like really like, this was something that he done, off the football field. But we were hyped. Like, he just broke, literally came in one season, broke the school record, broke the rushing yards record, all in one season. Hell, you can twerk everywhere you want to. For all I care, you come in here and do that, So, but I think when we talk, especially in football, basketball, I think I can't think of the guy's name. I think his last name was Collins, but he ended up playing his entire NBA career and was gay, and then announced after he retired that he was gay. But I think he tried to get back into the league, and it was kind of like nobody took a bite on him. And, he tried to come out and say, oh, it's because I came out and said I was gay. But if you looked at his career,
it's probably the end of his career.
Yeah. I think he had already been in the league for about 12, 13 years. So when we talk about things like that, as far as like, your sexuality in sports being a nonconformist, I still think, especially in like for male sports like football and basketball and even baseball, I can't think of any baseball players who have come out as being gay. I'm not 1,000% sure. I could be wrong. But, those 3 sports, those hyper masculine sports, I still think something like sexuality has a long ways to go, even though I think for the most part, a lot of people in the locker room wouldn't even care.
Right.
As long, and I've always felt like, well, as long as you ain't trying to impose your will on somebody else and impede their their freedom and stuff like that, do you. Who you do and what you do is clearly up to you. I could care less. As long as you come to this team, do what you got to do, don't cause any problems, cool.
So do you think it's less politicized on the male side versus a female side? Because I don't know, there seem to be a different, it's like if you're gay and don't speak up on the female side, it's like you get attacked. It's like, how come you're not? You can help so many people instead of, all right, so let everything out. I am also gay, right? So I'm old school in terms of, it's not that I'm ashamed or anything. It's just, it's not a topic for
sports.
It's not a topic to talk about.
Yeah, right. The only person whose sex life interrupted their career is Tiger Woods and Magic Johnson. But those are the only 2 athletes I can think of where their sex life literally derailed their sports career. I think Tiger Woods, his instance was a little bit, definitely overblown. He unfortunately he cheated on his wife, but hell, he was out there killing it on the golf course. So let's focus on Tiger as a golf player.
Yeah.
What he does as a husband, he's got to take it up with his wife and his children. Yeah. That's enough criticism right there. But don't ostracize and belittle the man because he was the one who got caught in golf doing it. You
Well,
know,
yeah, I be, but not accounting for what happened this weekend. I hope he
absolutely, yeah.
recovers. But I think with golf, it is such a mental game. I mean, it's such a mental game. That incident with Woods actually took him off mentally
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
because it
Yeah.
was, and he
And
haven't
sex was his
quite
vice.
recovered.
Yeah. I agree.
Along with the pain pills and stuff like that,
Yeah,
sex was
yeah,
also one of his vices and probably his primary vice.
right, right.
So, but also when I wanted to kind of transition to this and get y'all's opinions on it, and I'll share mine first, real quick. When we talk about nonconformity, in an individual sport like boxing, tennis, things like that, compared to a team sport, football, basketball, baseball, things like that. When I think of nonconformity in sports, in an individual sport versus a team sport, I'll just talk about the team side first. I think, when we talk about team, it's team. It's everybody's one. We're all we. You hear coaches say, you're only as good as your weakest link on the team or the worst player on your team. One team, one sound. Everything is about the team. And, I've had players on teams that I've played on, who have bucked the system, who are late to meetings, who, don't go all the way, don't go hard in practice,
Yeah.
show up late to dinners and things like that. And as a result of that, it impacts the team because, now we're shorter players. So now we got to pull somebody else from this side, and it throws off things. And they don't understand that even though you might not be a starter or you might not be in the rotation, everybody on the team is important. So when one person goes against it, it kind of throws off the team, especially when that one person can be a star player. Like if you have a star player in your team who is, especially in college, their grades are lacking, or, they're not participating in practice, or they're, arguing with the coach and stuff like that. Especially when you have a team leader who's very influential. When we talk about conformity and nonconformity, influence is very big on that and what we consider social norms and social standards in communities and within sports. So I think when we talk about nonconformity, I think for individual sports, I guess it's easier for that individual athlete to be a nonconformist because it's literally just them. They're responsible for them. If like in boxing, if I get knocked out, well, hell, I got knocked out. It ain't like everybody else lost. I got knocked out. Whereas in football, if the star quarterback decides, well, I'm going to be ineligible because I didn't want to go to class, well, the consequences of that is your team might struggle and not, get where they need to go. The coach might lose his job. People might lose scholarships. It's a snowball effect in a team sport compared to an individual sport. How do y'all feel about that?
Can I jump on that first?
Most
It
certainly.
it it reminds me of some of the things that Doc Rivers shared in the interview on that Netflix docu series. A couple of points that he made that are relevant to what you're saying, Ronnie. The first is when he talked about how bad things were when he first got to the Boston Celtics, and to your point about the point that you made about the star performers on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the website, the star performers on the team. Too many things going on in my head at one time. Um, what he did was he got um, Allen, was it Allen, Durant, and whoever it was, but it was his three key players. And he recognized, because in my opinion, he was a nonconformist coach. He recognized that if he could get their buy in to
Hmm.
what he was trying to get them to get accomplished, that they would have the ability to influence the team. And that was when he introduced that philosophy that I was sharing with you all before we went live, the Ubuntu, and he shared that with them and got their buy-in, and that proved to be instrumental in helping them to transform that team to that championship team that beat the Lakers. I think it was for the 2008 championship. But also his nonconformity and what that looked like with individual players in comparison to the team as a whole was when he was with the LA Clippers and all hell broke loose when the owner, those tapes came out from the owner and all of that racism and stuff that was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
the team had made the decision to, he received ridicule because society was trying to pressure them and pressure him into boycotting the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And they made the decision as him as the leader of that team and the collective team, they made a decision to go ahead and play in the playoffs anyway. But the way that they demonstrated their solidarity in protest of everything that had happened, because they were outraged, right? Is that the players decided, without telling him, he didn't know it until he saw it, that they were going to turn their jerseys inside out. So when they came out, their jerseys were inside out because he said when it all hit the fan and he first came to practice, he had his shirt on. And he said none of the players had their shirts on, and they were standing there looking at him like he was crazy with his arms crossed, with their arms crossed, and he was like, "Yeah, I guess this was a bad idea." um, so that was one. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out when you talk about the leaders of the team and how it affects team culture positively and negatively is the one that we're most familiar with in recent times, Colin Kaepernick kneeling and the press conference that he gave right after that game. And we know we're still dealing with the residuals of that today. Um, I believe so. My point to your point is I believe that the way to effectively manage nonconformity in the locker room is um, there has to be a discussion about how that's going to look for the team in its entirety. It can't be this lone ranger person that's saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. And I had always said, and people got pissed off at me about it, but I had always said, certainly as a woman of color, I am not knocking what Colin Kaepernick stood for. I think that it could have been handled differently, and had it been handled differently, it would have proven to be more effective.
Yeah. And to talk about to bring up Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling. And I have a question about that, and thinking of it as a head coach, just totally as a coach, not as a person of color, not as a woman anyway. So would I have accepted a disruption from a player that's on the bench
Mm.
Mm,
versus one that is a starter? How would I have handled that? Um, I don't know if you remember some years ago, a kid from Manhattanville College, Tony Smith.
That name
What?
sounds
mm,
familiar.
Yeah, well, she made the news. It was around Mahmoud time frame when she actually turned her back to the flag, and she didn't do well. That it actually made national news. That was a year after I resigned from Manhattanville, and I coached a kid. So, and I knew she was passionate about what she did, but I thought, and she was a starter, great player for that level. So, do you talk to the young lady? Um, and because it was, they had a great team that year, and I speaking to some of the players, they said that actually affected the team because you had people of different opinions, and in
mhm.
that area is greatly affected by the Twin Towers.
Mm.
So
Oh
it
yeah, I
split
can
it
definitely see
split
that.
yeah, so it
Yeah.
split the team. So how do you handle that? So you have differencing of opinions, and non-conformity um is a good thing when you know where the lines are.
Gotta
Hmm.
have boundaries.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think to that point, when we talk about, the whole Colin Kaepernick issue and, the whole how people felt about that, I think the biggest issue, and I'll just share my piece real quick about that. I think the biggest issue surrounding Colin Kaepernick was that, I don't know who he had talked to before he decided to do that. And I don't think he ever planned for it to blow up like it did. But I think that once it blew up and this was like, okay, this is the thing. We're going to talk about this. Every NFL team is going to have to deal with this. And what it showed was there was a lot of other players who shared the same sentiment as Colin Kaepernick. I think the issue is, and like we talk about when it comes to, conformity versus non-conformity, one of the, like I said, influence is something. And, while Colin Kaepernick is a very influential person, those NFL owners are a lot more influential strictly because, like when Seattle, when he went to go, I think, work out with Seattle, or even before that season, the Seattle defense, when it was still had Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, and those big prominent black athletes that had big voices on those teams, they were talking about, well, we'll boycott the season if y'all gonna feel some type of way about Kaepernick. But then it's like, the same issue of the NBA in the bubble about boycotting. Well, the upper echelon athletes can, boycott because they've already got their money. They've been paid. You got these lower tier levels, the backups and stuff like that, who are making, at that level,
$500,000. Yeah.
and while that's no money to sniff at in those areas and the taxes that they have to pay and all the other fees and stuff like that, that adds up. They just can't afford to sit out. And it wasn't like those other players were like, well, we'll support those on the team who don't make as much as we do to make sure we hold this stance. It wasn't like that. And I don't think that was what Cap's mission was, to start a movement like that. But it kind of got started, and then we saw where became the sacrificial lamb for this message. It's almost like they made him the villain because they needed to dispel this quick. They didn't want unity or rally behind that, because let's be real, his point is very real. He was talking about police brutality amongst people of color, especially Black people in America. That's been a topic that's been around for decades. That's not like a new topic. It's a consistent issue. Whether or not people like an athlete like Colin Kaepernick, or any athlete for that matter, talking about it, it needs to be talked about. His way of going about it could have been better. And to your point, the girl who did that, I can see that being a distraction for that team, especially a small school like that, where, they might not get that much attention that quick ever in their entire career there, or just in period. So having somebody do that, and then you have to deal with the consequences of their actions, that can be an example of maybe non-conformity not going the way that person planned. Even if that girl on that team, I'm pretty sure she didn't think that, oh, if I do this, the whole world will know about it, or the whole country will know about it, but they did. Yeah. And because of that, it affected the team and how the team performed. And I'm pretty sure it broke the trust up amongst those players. We can't really trust you because, your passion and how you feel overrides, your love for the game. And sometimes you have athletes who do that, where their passions off the field bleed onto the field, and it affects their on-field performance. And that's where we see that, that non-conformity start to become more of a cancer to the team as opposed to a benefit to the team.
And it's trust, it's trust. You don't have to, everybody doesn't have to agree with each other, but it's a level of trust that your teammate is thinking about the team rather than themselves. And it goes back to what I said earlier, bringing up Bill Walton and Coach Wooten. It's like, all right, this is my time. You are on my time, right? If you want to protest, you can protest any other time that you want. Why pick my time? And I understand it's the venue, but this is not the venue. And and I have to think of it as a coach, and as a future NBA owner. You're talking about money. All right.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
No matter, even though people say money isn't everything, well, these players have that venue because they can pay lots of money. So if the league suffer because your outwardly political views during the time that you're working, that's not good, because the league is the NBA is suffering not only from COVID, but people are not watching it. They're not watching it. So yeah, those players that's making lots of money, they will do well and they'll retire. But then the next CBA, how will that affect the future NBA? And it may, I don't know. I guess I wish we understood civics better, because we understand we have the power at the local level. if people don't go to a city council meeting to discuss police brutality, that's where it belongs. That's where it belongs. So, I mean, that's another subject, but civics is definitely needed in this country because it really is an easy subject to tackle because our taxpayer money pays for the police. The police are, you know, hired by the mayor and the city council, you know, and those people make the rules as to why, they, traffic rules or whatever. So if you don't like it, that's where you ought to start. If no one goes to a city council meeting, yeah, whatever, so that's where the
Yeah.
power is.
Absolutely, and what you're speaking of, what we would call in sociology is the social contract theory, where in a sense where you have a majority of people, as long as the majority agree with the rules or the standards or the culture and stuff like that, those who they choose to be the representatives will carry that out. And you, of course, you're not going to have everybody in agreement, but as long as the majority who conform to whatever rules have been set in place, as long as they follow it, those who don't follow it, they will always be seen as casted out of that society because they just refuse to conform in that instance. And I think to your point, I think civics is something that, it's easy to learn because it's something we all should know. I mean, those are our civic, we have civic duties as citizens of this country. And, that's our power. When we talk about, we always talk about this power that the people have, they always say if you take the mind, you can control the bodies. And kind of in a sense, that's what we deal with in society, so, the powers that be take our minds and they have us conform to these values and stuff that they see fit for them. And, when you have people who buck that system, they get ostracized or they get villainized and things like that, because anything that goes against the grain of the society is a threat to society. And to your point, anything that goes against the grain to the team is a threat to the team. And oftentimes coaches don't even think about it. That player is gone. We can't have it. We can't have any cancers on the team. They got to go. We can't have them because they'll pull the team down. Their nonchalant attitude or their lack of care or passion for that sport will harm that team.
Right.
So I think there is a place and a time for those conversations. But to your point, I think as far as for NBA players, NFL players, and things like that who have that platform and that voice, especially the Black players. And we always talk about, using our voice, using our platinum to promote awareness for good causes and things like that. Me personally, I don't think there's nothing wrong with those athletes bringing awareness to issues that harm their communities. Because, and to your point, of course there has to be, at the end of the day, there has to be a proper way of going about, getting these changes heard and things like that. And I absolutely agree with that. And we should use that political system. And I think I always tell people, if you want to see change in your area, stop looking at the government level. It's your local government, your city government. That's where change occurs, not at the national level, because understand this, when you get to the national level, when you get to that level of government, if you're not putting serious money in their pockets, everything you say is going in one ear and out the other. And you might not even get to the person who makes that decision. You might get to their seventh assistant to be able to share that information.
And the more power we give to the federal government, the less power we have, because that's everything. All rules start at we are a people with a government, not a government with a people. So
exactly,
we have to learn to be involved with our community, and that's not protesting. It's like it is. And it goes beyond voting, is actually getting involved with going to city council meetings, letting them know the issues. And then if they're not, I tell you this story. When I lived in Douglasville, right? And I went to a city council meeting and I had this one representative. They were mad at us because we did not vote for added tax. They're mad at us, right? So because we didn't want to be taxed anymore. So this particular city councilman said, I didn't have to. I was asked to sit on the board. I was asked. I'm like, y'all are not even scared of us. It's like, so because we have a duty as a people to act up, but let's act up in the right way. Let's act up as adults. with the people who truly are ignoring us, and that's at the local level.
Doesn't that go to what we say week after week after week about, the reality of it is that people really do perish from lack of knowledge. I've often said, when I consider my hometown of Salem, New Jersey, I get enraged. I would get so infuriated because my thing is, the focus is all wrong. People are worried about all the wrong things. You so busy worried about styling and
Yeah.
profiling and winning championships and stuff, but when you ride through Salem, and don't get me wrong, home is where the heart is, but I mean, y'all know, I can't wait to get going because there is a hierarchy. There is a hierarchy that exists in my hometown where, I hear my aunt saying that Salem's a wicked little town. You've got this small country town with a population of less than 7,000 people. We have five streetlights, but there's so much craziness that goes on in this community. Well, why is there so much craziness that goes on in the community? Because you know what? People don't take it seriously in voting for the Board of Education members. People don't take it seriously in voting for a mayor that is actually going to get things done. Just because somebody is black doesn't mean they're going to get the job done.
Hmm.
You know,
Or they
people
care
don't,
about getting the job done.
right?
Or
People don't recognize that when you vote properly for the governing body of the educational system, which is the Board of Education, the Board of Education is the person that hires the district superintendent. They don't take seriously that they have power to hire the county superintendent. They don't take seriously that they have the power. It's like people worry about the national election for the presidency. Well, to your point, what about the state legislators? What about the senators? What about the congressmen? What about the city council members? People don't worry about it. And then you wonder why your city is literally just collapsing and burning literally around you. There
Mm-hmm.
is such an issue of crime in Salem, New Jersey. From everything that I'm hearing, we got freaking females getting drive-by shootings now. Are you kidding me?
well, and
Are you,
also is
the
not
war zone.
is not only that. I mean, I know we shifted from sports, but it's also, the first layer of responsibility and care is to the family. Black families, I think, is 70% are without, two family
Two parent
household.
households.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I was listening to some Thomas Sowell earlier this week. I'm not sure if you know who Thomas Sowell he is. He's a black economist and social scientist. So he grew up in Harlem,
Hmm.
and he grew up in Harlem in the 1940s, 1950s. Yeah, yeah, 50s, 60s. And he said, growing up in Harlem, he never heard any gunshots. And most people had mothers and fathers
Hmm.
and grew up in a two family household. So it was only after the 60s, for some reason, that our culture, I don't want to say evolve, it did not, it disintegrated.
Well, and to answer that question without going too deep into it, that was definitely the hands of breaking down the black family, getting the black man
Right,
out of the household, preventing him to have jobs, be able to provide for the family,
right.
which forced the mom to leave the house, which left the kids by themselves, and you start to see this cycle of, well, now you have kids having kids who it used to be the family structure as well. Even if the parents had to go to work, they could go to the grandparents' house. Well, hell, the grandparents are still working too. So
Right.
not to go too deep into that, but yeah, you
Oh
definitely
yeah.
after the 60s, after COINTELPRO, and you see the dismantling of the Black Panther Party and things like this, you start to see the breakdown of the black family and the breakdown of the black communities. I mean, even over here in Richmond, Virginia, part of the black community, Jackson Ward, used to be connected right to downtown Richmond, but here comes this major interstate, I-95, through the heart of Richmond and basically cut off the black side of Richmond from all the essential resources and
Yeah.
stuff like that the city had to offer, which they had to eventually create for themselves, and they couldn't because then you had desegregation and things like that. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago about how,
Yeah.
as opposed to investing in your own, that fear of I want to be accepted by everybody, you leave your people behind in order to be accepted by everybody.
Yeah. Thomas, it was either Thomas. I listened to two Black economists, Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, and I can't remember, one of them said, "But we were doing fine before white folks started liking us."
And that's what I was talking about a couple weeks ago. And when in North Carolina, how when they had their own bus lines, their own restaurants and stuff like that, their own doctors and all that,
right.
They didn't care about not having what the white people had.
Right, exactly.
And then to your point about, about this whole political issues and stuff like that, we also, and I think to your point, when you have these athletes who come from these areas and, they're able to make it to this high level, even in this aspect and this perspective of it, why do we automatically look to these athletes to be the spokesperson for every Black issue out there? Right, for example, you have people like Kevin Durant, who Kevin Durant always says all he wants to do is play basketball and play video games. Everything else he's aware of, and he does what he does individually without talking about it on his platform, but he just wants to play basketball. And even somebody that my wife brought up, last year was The Rock. The Rock is half Black and half Hawaiian. But for the most part, when everything was going on with the George Floyd situation and all the, unrest during the summertime, he was relatively quiet. And, not saying that he's somebody that, the Black community looks to speak on our behalf, but, you see that, we limit, these large players like LeBron, Michael Jordan in the 90s. One of his famous quotes that kind of got him in trouble was, well, Republicans buy sneakers too. So you have these athletes who are in their own right, kind of are non-conformists to the whole standard of, well, I'm an athlete, I make all these millions of dollars, I have a platform that nobody else has the privilege of having. Let me use it to talk about all these issues that I might not necessarily be educated on or even, need to speak on it, but society says I have to.
Yeah. Well, I say to you, I think the best thing for the Black community is for individually we do our best, and that people can see our best without, I don't know, without flaunting it, I guess. I without saying, I don't know how best to say it, but
you almost like saying like I did it, you did it too, or like I did it, there's no excuse for you in a sense.
There all right, so I know my great grandmother. I don't know if I ever talked about my great grandmother who died at 105 in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
Right, so I never saw, and so she was pretty much indentured servant, right?
Yeah.
But in 1929 in Alabama, she had a house of her own. She had her own garden, and I guess what I learned from her is, number one, you're never going to get anywhere being angry. So if you're angry about who's your anger going towards anyway? I mean, we still talk about slavery, but the slave master is gone. So anger is poison internally. Right, so there's nobody to strike out. So we used to have the mixture of wealthy Blacks, middle class Blacks, and poor laborers in the same community. So without anybody making any big speeches about you can do it, I can do it, you can, you just had the evidence of it being done.
Yeah,
right.
And I think to your point, I think that is true. And I also kind of touched on this a couple weeks ago, where I said, wealth is something that is hard to pass down from generation to generation because, the person who will first achieve that wealth, that second generation after them can probably maintain it. But typically around the third or fourth generation is when you see that, well, I've already had this wealth. I don't know struggle. I don't know being without. So you start to see where that money gets mishandled and lost. I hear all the time, where, families like to your point, your great grandmother had a house, had a garden, had probably a big plot of land and stuff like that. It might make it to, your generation, the baby boomer generation and stuff like that. But when it gets to like my generation, the millennials and stuff like that, oftentimes those children from that era, their parents, they've sold that property off because they just don't want to handle it, or they don't have the economic means to maintain it or keep it up or pay with the taxes and things like that. So you start to see these people lose these properties that, of course, Black people have had properties and things like that throughout history. It's just being able to maintain it and have the same fairness of resources that everybody is supposed to be afforded to is where you start to see some of those issues. And to your point, at the end of the day, you still got to get it on your own and get it how you can.
I think wealth is a mentality. Wealth is if you think of yourself, as a man thinketh, so is he. Yeah. So, and I mean, this biblical, and it's written in everything I've been reading. So, you can, if you think of yourself as poor and life is wearing you down, you're going to get that evidence of that happening because you brought it upon yourself, basically. And I know people might be mad at me for saying that. I've been caught in that mind of not being enough, not being good enough. The world is a bad place, and I had evidence that it was. So, but as soon as I started thinking differently, it's amazing how things change.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, if you believe in the Bible, if you take a look at the Bible and not just take it literally, but as a man thinketh, so is he. I mean, it's very, you don't have to read into that.
I think that what you all just did was paint an extraordinary picture of how systemic issues can create individual, familial, and societal cancer. Um, when you, as you all were speaking, and my brain was just going nuts. You know, when you first started sort of fleshing it out, and Carla, you talked about how we were getting away from sports a little bit. I don't think we are. I don't think we are, because when you look at what we've talked about week after week, and why these athletes have this mindset that they have to get to the league because they have to be able to provide for their families and they have to be able to get out of those impoverished situations that they're in. I believe that it's just cyclical. Not
Mm-hmm.
only is it cyclical, it's systemic. And to your point, as I see that one of our viewers who has always said that poverty, he believes that poverty is a sin. And poverty is a state of mind, because you can have all the money in the world but still have an impoverished mindset. I
Yeah.
believe that to each of your points, I believe that wealth goes beyond monetary value. I think that you can have millions in the bank and be emotionally bankrupt. I believe that you can be, emotionally whole and be financially bankrupt. I believe that people have to look at all things considered. And when we tie all of this into what it looks like through an athletic lens, I think that people do, and again, I'm going to say it, you all know that I'm an educator too. I really truly believe that one of the ultimate reasons why people stay oppressed and suppressed and depressed is because of a lack of knowledge. Granted, there are far more people of color who, it does not appear, have figured out how to come up out of those situations and circumstances when you look at the numbers as a whole in comparison to some of us that are living um, more positive, productive, sustainable qualities of life. But I also say this: there but the grace of God go I. Because I've been homeless before, I've been hungry before, I've lived in my car before, I've had cars repossessed, I've had homes foreclosed on, I've had all of these things. And I remember, my grand aunt having conversations with me, about money management and wealth management and the whole nine yards. And one of the things that I said is, you can't manage money that you don't have. If you don't have a job, and if you don't have any income coming in, that until you're able to establish a stream of revenue, whether it's you working for someone else or you working for yourself, because what do we know to be true about supply and demand and building things, right? If all you're doing is withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing, at some point in time, your resource gets depleted. You don't have anything left to draw from. So certainly, you know, we don't want people to think that we're being insensitive to those that are experiencing poverty and lack and what have you. We know that there are some societal norms that are in place in this country. For example, the judicial system and how hard it is for people that are coming from incarceration to find a job, to find a place to live, to you know, to be lucratively and gainfully employed. We know that the recidivism rate in this country is ridiculous. We know that there is no other country in the world that incarcerates Black men and women and brown men and women to the degree that the United States does. But at the end of the day, there are still, to Carla's point and to Ronnie's point, there are still some individual things that we have to do in order to sort of shift ourselves from being a part of the conforming 97% of the global force to that 3% that, in my opinion, really are nonconformists that are saying, yes, you know what, Dr. Pitts, Dr. Lauren Denise Pitts, who is the 7th grandchild of Dorothy Pitts, who only had a 10th grade education, and Lester Earl Pitts, who only had an 8th grade education, the 7th grandchild, the first one to graduate from college, whose grandfather said in 6th grade, we ain't got no money. If you want to go to college, your brain is going to be your ticket out of Salem, New Jersey. Well, damn, I believed him.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
I actually got to go to school and pay attention and get good grades. Well, maybe I should do that. And you know what? Let me just go ahead and put, I'm on the right. Y'all, see, y'all messed around and y'all spoke for 10 minutes and I got it all bottled up. Now I got to let it out. So here's the thing. If folk go on my website, drlaurendpitts.com, and you read my bio, you know that one of the things that I have dealt with literally my entire life, domestic violence, gun violence, molestation, sexual abuse, poverty, lack, substance use and abuse, like all of the big ones that would serve well and give me all of the reasons I needed to be a substandard contributor to society. I have often said that if it was not because of my relationship with God, I would be dead, in jail, crazy, a prostitute, or a drug addict or alcoholic. I've got every reason in the world to be any of those things. And guess what? Nobody would blame me. People would say, well, you know what she was subject to. You know, she's 53 years old. She's never met her biological father. You know, she went through this and went through that and all of these things. I have all of the reasons in the world to be mediocre, to be a failure, to be a victim, to be a negative statistic. But to each of your points, something in here had the audacity to let me know that this does not have to be my story. And it's not going to be my story. It don't mean that I don't cry. It don't mean that I don't shed blood, because I literally have sweat and tears to fight and claw and struggle to not have that be representative of my life's entirety. But I chose to do things differently because of and in spite of. I chose to not give up in the face of adversity. I chose to not allow the color of my skin and my gender and the mistakes of my past to keep me bound to a life of mediocrity. I chose to piss people off and stir the pot to have my voice heard, to be instrumental in making whatever change I can make. I chose to be a part of this team, to be a part of a louder global voice and reach that sheds light on how oppressive a lack of knowledge can be, that serves as a cancer, depleting every single solitary area of a Black and brown person's life. Now I know white folks suffer because they don't know stuff too, whatever. But right now we talk about us. And one of the biggest, biggest issues that we face as a people, despite oppression, despite the incarceration rates, despite all of the injustice and inequality and all of that stuff, one of the biggest issues that we face as a people is a lack of knowledge.
I wholeheartedly agree.
I agree.
And I always say those who don't know will repeat the same thing over and over again.
Right.
So, well, I mean, Dr. Pitts, I don't know why you do this to me. You go on these rants, and here I am going to try and follow up after you, knowing that I don't articulate my message nearly as beautifully as you do.
And powerful.
We got a couple other things I want to highlight real quick before we close it on out. The first thing I want to highlight is, and you've heard us throughout this show, kind of talk about some of the positive of nonconformity, but I want to highlight some moments in sports history where nonconformity has been beneficial to sports, going forward. One of the first ones I want to go to all the way back a century ago to, and Dr. Pitts, you actually highlighted this person on your on Instagram this week, was Jack Johnson.
Yes.
I actually just watched a little mini documentary on Jack Johnson on YouTube, and it talked about how he won the Black heavyweight world title in, I think, 1896. Mm-hmm. And from 1896 to 1906, he defended that title against the top Black boxers, but none of the top white boxers wanted to box him because of the message it could send getting knocked out by a Black guy. So I can't remember his first
name. That's hilarious to me.
It's crazy how, and it's mind-blowing how just simple and the reasons they will come up with to belittle and discredit Black people were, their own insecurities and their own fears just casted onto us. And it's crazy how when you realize when somebody's casting their fear and criticisms about themselves onto you, when they criticize you,
yes,
you see how sad it was. So to make a long story short, this white boxer, I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Burns. He came out of retirement. He retired the world heavyweight champion, came out of retirement, got knocked out by Jack Johnson, and Jack Johnson went on for the next 11 years to hold the title as the best world heavyweight title person in the world. So he lost it in, I think, 1916. By that point, he was well into his 40s. Another moment, we talked about this before, University of Texas El Paso's basketball team, the first all-Black basketball lineup in NCAA history, went on to be the all-white lineup of the University of Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah.
Another moment, and we talked about this last week, what we kind of call the fall of HBCU football, is when USC came to Alabama with their majority Black roster and beat the brakes off of Alabama. As a result of that, the famous coach Paul Bear Bryant went on to start recruiting Black players at Alabama, so on and so forth. So these are all moments in sports history where being a nonconformist actually benefited not only the sport, but the world itself, because everybody I just mentioned were all people of color. And, we saw for so long that people of color were held out of so many different things in sports for so long. And, facts are facts, it's just, we're, genetically, in certain athletic acts, just genetically superior. And, can't argue science sometimes. Science, it is what it is, you know.
But Jim and the Greek got fired for saying that. So, so like, watch it.
I mean, I'm just, you know, look, there are science articles out there to back it up. I'm just, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just preaching.
I'm just saying, Jim and the Greek didn't survive.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't have Jimmy the Greek's type of voice or platform yet, but you know, hey, you know, if somebody wants to prove me wrong or you know show me otherwise, I mean, I'm not saying that's across the board. Don't you know?
No, I'm kidding with you. I'm kidding with you.
And then so to finish it off, you know, so one of the last things was, well, what reactions will elite scholar athletes receive if they attend HBCUs instead of a PWI? To kind of answer this, and I want both of you all to share your answers too. I think this kind of talks about, to my point earlier when I was giving my mental health tip, talking about overthinking and, you know, being over anxious about something. You know, for example, what if Muhammad Ali, when he was first charged with draft dodging, and they told him that, no, we're going to suspend your boxing license in every state. You're not going to be able to box. We don't know how you're going to get money. And what if he'd have just sat there and said, well, I guess I got to go over here and fight in Vietnam in order to keep my prime. He still would have lost his prime whether or not, but because he didn't conform and he stood within his beliefs, he became the person and figure and role model for a lot of people we admire him for being today. Mm-hmm. So to answer this, I think collectively you'll have to see superior, you know, elite Black athletes go to HBCUs together, you know, especially in a sport like football where it's going to take multiple years, consistent years of the top Black athletes going to HBCUs in order for you to see this kind of shift that people want to see where they go to HBCUs over PWI. Mm-hmm. However, and until that happens, you know, when we're talking about the student athletes who we talk about come from the areas where they're trying to provide for their families, look, we're not telling you where you should go or where you shouldn't go. At the end of the day, you got to provide for your family and you're going to make the choices that you want to make. We want to provide with you as much knowledge and information about what school choice you decide to go to and give you all the information as possible to make the best choice. Like Dr. Pitt said, having as much education and knowledge about something as possible, you will make the best informed decision. So how do both of you all feel about that as we wrap this up, about what the reaction or how that might be if Black athletes start to go to HBCUs over PWIs?
Carla, I'll let you go and then I'll close this out.
And depending on the kid, depending on how his ranking is, it'll be a big story, and there'll be some cause for concerns. But will be interested to know if there'll be enough kids to really shake up that world. But they can still make it in the professional ranks going to HBCU. It's already been proven. But they'll probably have to work a little bit harder to get noticed and not forgotten.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to require a cultural shift that is going to have to start in the home, in parents being able to educate themselves about the HBCU experience, being able to understand the process behind the visions of dollar signs dancing in their head if, you know, their son or daughter goes to the league. So I think that it starts there in education in the home and recognizing that, you know, we know that recruiters don't just recruit to the kid, they recruit to the parents too, as Carla has shared with us on previous shows. So when I think about it, the Texas Miners and the whole, you know, Don Haskins thing and how he sent these white recruiters into the homes of these African-American players, and they won the parents. The parents were the ones that were instrumental in telling their children, this is where you're going, right? Mm-hmm. So there has to be an education that is occurring with the parents of these children. So that creates this space for these HBCU coaches and recruiters to really have those informative conversations with these Black and brown parents, or for example, in your case, Ronnie, with the multiracial parent, and say, you know, we understand that we're not providing X, Y, and Z like a PWI can, but this is what we can provide. And I think that if we can increase the level of education that the parents are receiving, then in turn, they can also be responsible for enhancing the knowledge and the awareness that their children are getting. And we can begin slowly but surely to create that cultural shift. But I believe that it's going to start with education in the home. I told you all we had a powerful conversation for you today. I tried to tell you, and it's all Ronnie and Carla's fault. I was sitting here, I was waiting for them to say they were fleshing it out, and I'm like, I'm about to explode. I'm about to explode. But yeah, so look, folks, this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up for today, but we are really looking forward to having you join us next week. What I'm going to do, because we desperately want you, not desperately, I don't like that word, because we want you to be involved in these conversations. I ain't desperate for nothing. We want you to be involved in these conversations. So I'm going to put the Zoom link out there so that you can log in live for the show. But understand that when you come in, you're going to come in muted. You'll be able to participate in the show selectively and tastefully, because we want to hear from you. We want to know that we are making a difference in your lives. And we're going to continue to put this information out there for you week after week. Ronnie, we're going to mix you next week, but we'll see you the following week. Have a great, great time. Give Mrs. Ransom our love. Rub that belly. Rub that belly. Rub that belly.
I got you.
We will see you all and hope to engage with you even more next week at 11 a.m. on House Talk pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts and my guests, Ronnie Ransom and Carla D. Grow, as my host. Thank you.
Bye-bye.